My previous video was a list of the most genre-defining classics every year from 1955 up until 2019, and some people loved the video, some people argued with the list, but a frequent comment that I received was, well, music is subjective. There's no objective right or wrong answers in music. You can't say something like, obviously the correct answer is X when it comes to music, because it's all just subjective. Wrong. That's a layman take. Even if you're a veteran audio engineer, even if Bob Ludwig, Steve Albini, Andrew Sheps, Bob Clearmountain, Glyn Johns and Doug Sachs all sat down in a room together and agreed that music is subjective, it's still a lay take. Why? Because the terms objective and subjective don't come from audio, they come from philosophy, specifically metaphysics, and none of those guys, as far as I'm aware, are metaphysicians. And if you take a bunch of legend experts from one field and put them in a completely different, unrelated, different field, guess what? They all suddenly become laymen. I don't go to my mechanic when I have a toothache, and I don't go to my dentist to fix my car. So why am I making this video? What are my core specialties? Well, anyone who's followed me knows that I'm a professional mastering engineer, been doing it for almost 20 years. But one thing many people don't know about me is that I went off for a few years and studied philosophy. And I don't just mean I watched a few Alan Watts videos and started saying namaste and thinking that I was enlightened and superior to everyone else, such is the case with most people who claim to be knowledgeable about philosophy nowadays. But rather, I actually formally studied academically philosophy, and I never made any money from philosophy, so I can't say that I'm a professional, but the only way you make money from philosophy is by teaching others philosophy, which is one of the most obvious examples of an educational Ponzi scheme I can think of, and sometimes I feel what is taught in mainstream academic philosophy is such a complete waste of time, it's being done merely to perpetuate the Ponzi. But I feel confident enough on the subject to explain in this video why I think the terms subjective and objective are often misused, and why people who think that my last video was entirely subjective are actually wrong. So the terms subjective and objective are not doing the work people think they're doing. What do people normally try and mean by objective? An example could be measuring a song having an integrated Lufts value of -14. And is scientifically measurable, repeatable, beyond dispute, and has nothing to do with your feelings. So people like to say that it's objective. What about subjective? Consider the claim that Rebecca Black's Friday is a bad song. Maybe some people think it's a good song. So it's completely down to the taste of the listener, right? No. In this video, I'm going to show you why both of these terms fail when used in those ways. Of course, I understand that to some degree I'm just shouting into the void here, and people are just going to continue to use these words in the audio industry, regardless of whether I think the words are dumb. And perhaps around 10,000 people might see this video, but thousands of people, that's not to be sniffed at, so let's see where we go with this. So, mastering shows us the problem. Think about mastering. If everything was just purely a matter of taste, how could a mastering engineer consistently improve mixes without the artist giving very detailed instructions? And why wouldn't they just do it themselves? If taste were the only guide, the track that the artist sends to be mastered would already be perfect for them, and the engineer wouldn't know what to do. Yet, in practice, good mastering engineers do improve mixes reliably, so the fact that mastering engineers exist are a good heuristic for why music cannot just purely be subjective. There are things in music which can't really be pointed to on a chart, they can't really be quantified with a numerical value, but which every single mastering engineer worth his salt can identify immediately with precision. And I think this is one of the main reasons why AI mastering still sucks, and that's because of all of the things which are clearly not subjective, yet still can't reliably be quantified. But let's turn up the philosophical heat slightly now. So in audio we say -14 Lufts, and this is called objective. But if I go out into the world and try and find a Lufts value laying around, I won't find one. If I try and go out and look for the average taxpayer, thinking that if only I looked hard enough, I would find the average taxpayer, I would find him. But that's just making what is called a category mistake. A Lufts value doesn't exist in nature. It doesn't exist outside of its proper context. If someone doubts the Lufts value and the meter's saying -14 Lufts, and someone's like, nah, I don't know if it's -14 Lufts, we're not going to argue for that long. At some point, we're just going to say, but this is how we measure Lufts. Stop being annoying, right? Lufts is part of the grammar of audio engineering. So when you say it's objective, that it somehow exists beyond human subjectivity in some kind of mind-independent realm, no, it doesn't. It exists as part of the language of audio. It exists in its use by audio technicians. So the word objective doesn't do the kind of work people think it does here. So next up, let's destroy the usage of the word subjective as well. So someone might say, I just like this mix better. People like to call that subjective. Why don't you like this mix better? There must be some reason why you prefer one over the other. And if the person says, no, I just prefer this mix over the other one, that's just my subjective opinion, then the lack of justification isn't proof that it's subjective. He's just withdrawing from the conversation, or maybe incapable of understanding his own thought process. But if he starts to give reasons, now we can start invoking some criteria for having preferred one over the other. The vocal is not present enough. The low end is too muddy. These are not descriptions of hidden inner experiences and truths accessible only to the individual. They're applications of shared standards. And the reasons why noobs can't judge a good mix from a bad one is because they haven't learned those shared standards yet. Just like you learn to judge facial expressions. We don't go around saying that the interpretation of facial expressions is purely subjective and that there's no wrong or right answer. Of course not. If someone scowls at you, then there's no alternative school of thought that interprets that facial expression as being happy. Anyone who thinks a scowling face is happy is demonstrably wrong, and saying that the interpretation lies in the eye of the beholder or that personal expression is subjective doesn't make you any less wrong. Humans have many shared standards, and we can participate in these shared standards without even understanding what they are. So I know absolutely nothing about interior design. But when I walk into a horribly designed room or a professionally designed room, I can somehow just feel the difference, despite my cluelessness about interior design. There are reasons why, and interior designers know those reasons, and I don't know those reasons, yet I can still participate in those shared standards. Beauty is not in the eye of the beholder. And if that wasn't already sufficient to demonstrate subjectivity doesn't work here, let's just do another example. So, Michael Jackson was a good dancer. If someone comes along and said, no, Michael Jackson wasn't a good dancer, it'd be like, what? It's the vocal equivalent of a fart. I can acknowledge that it happened. I'm just not sure what I'm supposed to do after you made the noise. Because to say that Michael Jackson wasn't a good dancer isn't offering some kind of alternative opinion here, as if one person looked at the sky and said it's going to rain and his friend was like, no, I don't think it's going to rain. No, it's not like that. It's not a disagreement like that. To deny that Michael Jackson was a good dancer is not to express an alternative empirical opinion, but to misuse or radically revise the criteria by which good dancer has its meaning. Part of my understanding of what a good dancer is includes Michael Jackson. So to contradict this isn't offering some kind of new information, you're just misusing grammar. Makes me think, are we talking about the same thing? What are you talking about? The exact same thing holds for music. So if you want to come up to me and say The Shape of Jazz to Come is a bad album, it's not expressing your subjectivity. It's just ungrammatical. The same way, if you deny that a mix is muddy, where all of the criteria apply, it's not to express a different sensation. It's to refuse the grammar in which muddiness has its place. In the practice of audio, there are certain things which we can't doubt. We don't argue about them because they're the hinges on which all discussion turns, that sound exists, that it can be perceived, that recordings can be compared and described, that terms like muddy or bright or clear have a shared meaning. These aren't optional conventions, they're necessary certainties, and without them, the language of audio would collapse into nonsense. Doubting certain things in audio is like trying to doubt that the world exists. You're allowed to doubt that the world exists, but it belongs to the logic of our scientific investigations that certain things are indeed not doubted. We just can't investigate everything, and for that reason, we're forced to rest content with assumption. And if I want the door to turn, the hinges must stay put. Some things in audio are not rules to follow, not facts to verify, not subjective preferences. They are the preconditions of intelligibility which allow us to say anything meaningful at all about audio. And whether we're talking about luffs or the muddiness of a mix, neither term objective nor subjective captures what's happening. We're not describing metaphysical facts or private tastes. We're describing things that we audio people do using the language of audio. When things get established in the industry, people want to start calling them objective, but the better approach is just to say, this is how we do things, this is how stuff is done in our industry. And the words objective and subjective become silly once we start to understand that audio is a language game, a set of shared standards, and a practice that we participate in.